and welcome to Mount Daniel. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Lindsey Covey. I'm the assistant principal, and you are going to be hearing from our amazing PYP coordinator, Lauren Carpell. The purpose really of today is to really kind of demystify the language around what does it mean to be a PYP school, especially with our youngest learners. Well, it's actually also with our preschoolers, but with our K-2 students. What does that look like? Types of questions and things that you can ask students at home and what you can expect students to be receiving as a part of this IB division. So Lauren will be taking us through this presentation, and it's informal, so at any time, please ask questions and we can make it more of a conversation.
So thank you, Lindsey, for the introduction. My name is Lauren Carpell, and I am the PYP coordinator at Jesse Thackeray, Mount Daniel, and Oaks. So kind of everywhere all at once, and I'm in my second year here in this position. Prior to being a PYP coordinator, I was a choir teacher at Henderson and Meridian for 16 years and moved. And when we brought in MYP, I immediately was like, yes, this is the way that we should educate children. Absolutely. It aligned so much with my philosophy that I went all in on all things IB and took on as many leadership roles as I possibly could, helped with projects and stuff. And so 2 years ago, I kind of was doing a part-time position as an IB specialist, supporting our coordinators. And then when this position opened up, because Carrie Checka wanted to move into the assistant principal position, I was really excited to come over and support this work. So I grew up in this area. I went to Lake Braddock, so I'm a local girl, and got my degree at Northwestern in vocal performance and music education, and came back here to start my teaching career. My whole family's here, and now I'm raising my identical twin girls here. They're in second grade in Fairfax County, and that was a picture from a helicopter ride that my husband and I took on our 10-year anniversary trip this summer. After going through all the windy roads in St. Lucia to get from the airport to the resort, we decided a helicopter back was like a way better choice for us, and for me specifically. So I'm really glad to be here today to talk a little bit about IB. So we're going to play a little fact or fiction with IB, just kind of demystifying, like Lindsey said. We're going to talk about what's new this year, what's different, what's the same, and then anytime you have a question, just feel free to jump in. I was going to save it to the end, but if we're at a point in my presentation that you have a question, like this is pretty informal setting, so just holler. All right, so hopefully my animations work and I'm not giving away any answers here, but fact or fiction, all students in FCCPS are IB students. Do you think that's fact or fiction? See, that's good inferencing. Yes, all students in FCCPS are IB students. This is our lovely roadmap that Mary Beth Connolly made that kind of shows the journey from JTP all the way up to Meridian, but it's really an exciting time in the IB continuum because at the K-2 level, our kids are the most curious. Kids are natural inquirers, and so the IB philosophy really works well here at Mount Daniel. So our next question is, see, this is what happened at Oak Street too. I gave away the answer. I thought I fixed that one, but yes. The primary areas program is actually not a curriculum. The word program leads you to believe that it's something that comes from a textbook and we implement, but it's actually a framework. It's a curriculum framework. So everything we do fits within the program model, which I'm going to show you here shortly. So this is the PYP program model, and there's a lot of different components, and I'm only going to talk about a couple of them today just because there's a lot that goes into the PYP. But it's really, the PYP is all about these different elements, teaching and learning, the learning community, and the learner themselves, and about preparing our students to be internationally minded. The mission of the IB is that we want kids to go out into the world aware that they're surrounded by other cultures, other people, other beliefs, and to be able to navigate that world in a way with compassion and caring. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the core components of IB that actually go all the way from pre-K through 12. So the IB Learner Profile, which is up here, is a collection of 10 attributes That IB says after you've mastered these 10 attributes, you are internationally minded. But really it's about character development, right? So what the qualities that we want our students to embody as they move through the world. They're caring, they're knowledgeable, they're thinkers, they're risk takers. So you might hear some of that language hopefully come home with your students. We talk a lot about being principled, which is this idea of doing the right thing, making the right choices. So a lot of times when we're walking through the hallways or we're dealing with possibly a peer-to-peer conflict, which never happens, right? We use some of this language to say, how could you be more caring, right? Are you being principled by staying in line and listening to adults in the building, right? So it's just, and what's beautiful about the learner profile is because this language is used consistently at every single grade level, that's how it becomes ingrained in our students. By the time they're 18 and ready to move on to the next part in their life, we hope that this is just who they are, right? My other favorite element of IB is the idea of approaches to learning. And this is how we teach kids to learn how to learn. I don't know if you remember back in your elementary school days, but children were seen and not heard, right? And you were just automatically listening to the teacher, and the teacher would direct you with everything what to do. This is much more teacher as facilitator of learning, teacher as coach. How can you figure out these problems? How can you be resilient? So we have five areas of approaches to learning skills: communication, social, self-management, thinking, and research. And so we're constantly practicing these skills with our students. I would say the most important thing that we can teach our kids is how to think. I attended the IB Global Conference over the summer, and they were talking about the future of AI and how it affects education. And this guy who's a futurist and a technologist, which sounds like a terrifying career if you ask me, but he was saying that AI will never be able to do metacognition. It will never be able to think about its own thinking. So we're really teaching kids how to go out in the world and discern fact from fiction, cite their, dig into your sources, understand what you're thinking about, and also how to respond when situations happen in the future. And we're working at those things every single day. How to work with other people, right? I used to tell my middle schoolers all the time, there's no career that you just go out and you never work with another person, right? That's not a thing. And so you have to learn how to interact with other people in the world, and that's a lot of what we're doing here. So some of the ways that PYP shows itself on a daily basis in Mount Daniel. I mentioned inquiry before. I always tell the kids inquiry is just a fancy word for you're really curious. So let's find out. And we do this through the concept of provocations. So the kids will get a question or a video or a picture or a scenario that they start to get curious and find out about what they're learning. Our first graders actually just did this provocation that's up here, which is what would you need for if you were stranded on a deserted island? And they have to kind of negotiate with their teammates about what they would prioritize. And this leads into their unit about economics. So then they start learning about needs and wants and goods and services and producers and consumers. So even though this provocation is from PYP, it then ties into our Virginia Standards of Learning. So we're basically making those standards, which are dry and on paper, come to life in a way that makes sense to kids. So here we talked about collaboration. That's a huge part of the PYP, is relying on other people to bounce thoughts off of, listening to different perspectives, and then having to come to consensus, which I work with adults mostly now. Coming to consensus is probably one of the hardest things that we do when we're working with other people. So it's important that we're already learning it at an early age. Another part of the PYP framework is conceptual understanding, which is how kids make meaning of the world. I talk about concepts a lot as a backpack, right? If the concept is the backpack, all the information that you know about that concept goes in the backpack. So a kindergartner, for example, understands that red is a color and green is a color and sees something different and doesn't know what it's called, but they know it's a color because they understand the concept of color and can transfer their learning to different places. So in this one, the kids were talking about the way that plants, animals, and people were interdependent on each other. So interdependence being the concept that they talked about. that all these things are connected, right? Plants are not isolated from in their interactions with humans. Animals are not isolated from their interactions with plants, right? So everything is related in the world. And this also helps when a kid is learning about a concept in their homeroom, and then they can transfer the same concept to art class, for example, right? So if they're talking about the form of a math equation, and then they're going into art, they might be talking about the form of a sculpture, right? So form, that overarching concept, is helping their brains make those connections all over the place, which is kind of amazing. What's cool about the IB program in general is PYP is what we call transdisciplinary. So it's all about getting kids to connect to this big idea, which I'll talk about in a minute. When they move into MYP, it becomes interdisciplinary. So it's a little bit more narrow. They're talking about how certain things relate in certain classes, but it's not all to connect to this big, broad idea. And then once they get to DP and CP, it's disciplinary, it's subject specific. They're ready to dig into a physics or an IB music or one of those kind of topics where they can really dig in. So IB, even in its big overall progression, understands that like this is easier for kids to learn at a younger age, and then as they get older, it kind of moves in more complexity. I was attending, I think, Lindsey, we might have been at a session together where they were talking about kids don't experience the world in isolation, right? Like everything is happening all at once. And so PYP really lends that itself to that idea that like we're trying to unpack the world and figure out how it all makes sense. And so it's kind of beautiful in that way. And then this last piece, agency and action. IB always encourages kids to go out in the world and make a change, to make choices and to have a voice in their learning. And so whenever we can, give kids an opportunity to express their learning in a way that makes sense to them, we do it. These girls are now, I believe, sophomores or juniors at high school. I ran into them at Starbucks a couple weeks ago, and I was like, I might have still used your picture in a PYP presentation, but they were in 5th grade, and they wrote a PTA grant to organize their classroom, because the unit was how we organize ourselves, and so they took action to figure out a better way to organize their classroom supplies, which I know their teacher appreciated very much. So we'll move into a little bit like what's new this year, what you might see that's historically different if you have a 2nd grader than the past 2 years. And we're going to talk a little about new things that are coming out of the state that are impacting what is happening in our building. So these are our home connections. Hopefully you've seen these come home. The idea here that was given by Miss Bodner, who's one of our fabulous 2nd grade teachers, is what Lindsey alluded to, demystifying IB, because at the end of the day, it's like, what concepts are they learning? What are they learning about? There's also some school-to-home enrichment ideas, ways that you as a family can take action with your kids, ways that you can extend their learning as a family. So we encouraged families to take their kids to vote yesterday, right? Because they were learning about election day, they were learning about civic responsibility and things like that. And then we just have some conversation starters for the dinner table, because I don't know if you have 2nd graders, what did you do today? Nothing. Right, but you didn't do nothing, right? And so instead, I have learned to ask pointed questions based on what my kids' teachers are sending home. What made you curious today? What did you learn about habitats today? So this is supposed to give you kind of a peek inside your child's classroom and the ability to have more richer conversations with them. And oftentimes we'll try to embed the learner profile attributes into some of these conversation starters, like how are you a risk taker today? How did you what did you learn today about knowledge? So those are kinds of some of the things that you'll see with these home connections. And we've translated them in multiple languages or send them home via school status connect, so families can access them in whatever way they need to. So One of the huge things that is happening this year, the Virginia Literacy Act has made it so that we last year were able to pick out a language arts curriculum, and we're implementing it this year. It's called Amplify Core Knowledge Language Arts, and it is based on evidence. It's a scientifically based research-based curriculum that has a little bit more explicit teaching about phonics and other components, because we know that the K through 2 level is when it's very important for kids to learn how to read. If they want to be able to access that higher level content, this is the place that all those foundational skills are happening. And then teachers are facilitating connections between our language arts curriculum and the PYP framework. So if you have the PYP framework over here, then think about all of our curriculums and standards go underneath, and then those concepts connect all those things and the central idea, and that's how the framework works. It's a lot. It's a lot. And honestly, I would say 9 times out of 10, like, kids won't be able to explain that, but it's all about how we design instruction. So they understand that what they're learning in language arts and what they're learning in math connects to the central idea, but it's up to the teachers to make that magic happen, and that's why they're also brilliant and wonderful and can do all of those things. Kids oftentimes have these amazing, fun science experiments and simulations, and their brains are working really, really hard, and they can't always articulate it at this level, but that's okay, because we, as the adults, know all the cool things that they're learning. Additionally, we also have some new math standards that we're implementing this year, and I am geekily excited about these new math standards because they are much more inquiry-based and friendly to the PYP framework. It's not just, as we used to do, a drill and kill, right? You get a worksheet, you do 50 math problems and call it a day. We're teaching students how to think so that if they approach a problem that they don't have the exact strategy for, they can reach into a bank of strategies and figure out how to solve that problem, which is really what we do every day, right? We encounter a problem, we figure out how to solve it. We encounter a new problem, we figure out how to solve it, because we have this bank of strategies already embedded inside our bodies that we know what to reach for. So for example, in the first math unit that they did, they were talking about the data cycle. So they might go survey their class and then make a graph and understand what the makeup of their class is, who rides the bus home, who walks home, right? And so they were able to go through that entire process of thinking about how all of those things happen. My daughter did a similar thing in Fairfax County because all the math standards are the same, and she surveyed her class to find out which Pokemon was their favorite. So, that's where the voice and choice comes into the classroom as well all the time. So there has been this huge shift in the concept of teaching literacy over the past couple of years, and it's called the science of reading. And you may have heard about it. There was a very well-known podcast that came out, and this is happening all across the country, that educators are realizing that a combination of explicit instruction and inquiry-based instruction is actually the best way to reach kids. So as an IB school, we are not rejecting the science of reading, we are embracing it, because IB is all about what's doing best for our students that are in the room. One of the things that I love about IB is how flexible it is with meeting kids where they are. We can wind it forward, wind it back, all of those kinds of things. But IB has come out and said that we have always followed research. And so when the research takes us in a different direction, as an organization, we shift with that knowledge and that research as well. So we're certainly not abandoning all of our IB practices. In fact, I would say we're doubling down on them and truly trying to figure out how all of these pieces work together to help our kids understand some of these big ideas in the world. So the IB coordinators and I were sitting around at the end of, I guess it was this summer, and we were talking about all the things that we had done with all of our IB programs and how part of the barrier between getting our community to understand what IB truly is this fancy language that IB uses. Even the words transdisciplinary, whenever I type it into a Google document, Google tells me it's not a real word. word every single time. I'm like, it is, I promise. Or maybe it isn't. Maybe IB just made it up. I don't know. Who knows? But at the end of the day, what I love about PYP, what I love about IB is that we're developing the whole child. And so Josh Singer, who's the diploma program coordinator over at the high school, he said, at the end of the day, we just want our kids to be good people who go out in the world and do great things. And so that's kind of the mantra that we've adopted for this year and hopefully going into the future is good people, great things. Because taking away all that fancy language, conceptual learning, inquiry-based learning, all of those kinds of things, we want our kids to go out into the world and be okay. So I know that Mr. Brett, who's recording today, will share out this presentation as well. I'll share my slides with him. I've put some additional resources in here. I have a little PYP at a glance document just as a front and back page. You might have gotten it actually at back to school night. Some of the teachers handed out. That's kind of like a cheat sheet for PYP. And then I, of course, linked our website, which has some additional parent resources on it as well. And I know that your kids are in second grade right now, but soon they'll go on to Oak Street and they'll get to experience PYP Exhibition, which is our big culminating fifth grade project that we do. And then they'll be able to go on to Henderson and be successful in all the things that happen there in Meridian. And we're excited for their journey. So if anybody has any questions about PYP, I'm happy to answer them. And so I'll open it up to you all.
Yeah, I did have a question about the literacy aspect.
Sure.
Can you just give me,
Sorry, I'm warm now. I'm talking.
what were they doing last year versus what they're doing now with the new curriculum? What is obsolete now and what has been replaced, I guess?
So Mount Daniel specifically was in a really good place with the shift to literacy. Almost all of our teachers got trained in Orton Gillingham, which is a model of teaching phonics explicitly. And so in terms of what's going from last year to this year, it's just the program that we're using to do it, but a lot of the strategies and everything are the same. I would say in terms of what's obsolete being like historically the way that literacy has been taught was much more based on context clues and inferencing and using the pictures around them to figure out different words, but it wasn't giving the kids like, if you see a word that you've never seen and there's no context clues around, how do you read that word? Right? So it's kind of giving kids like a guideposts almost to figure out how to navigate the English language, which is very confusing to learn. And so I would say that, Lindsey, would you say that captures kind of the difference?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so as a school, one thing that we felt really good about, like being kind of ahead, and I'm sorry, I realize I'm not repeating to you, but is that almost every single one of our classroom teachers were OG trained Orton Gillingham, which is, an evidence-based strategy for teaching phonics. And we were already seeing huge gains in our students with spelling. For example, at Oak Street, kids going into third and fourth grade that had it, you could see huge gains. And
They actually had higher scores on spelling than the current older grades, the kids that had come up through Mount Daniel. So we're hoping those things continue, right? Like that's the idea. And what's nice about Amplify, CKLA, which we're using, is it's being used pre-K through 5. And as a person who has seen, who works with every single grade pre-K through 5, I'm like, I promise it builds on itself. I promise, because I'm digging into every single unit with my teachers. And so I can see the progression of learning. It feels a little bit bumpy this year, I know, to some of our teachers because they don't have the background knowledge, but I really think in 2 to 3 years, we're gonna see just like an explosion of positive, even more positive data than we already have. Right. Because honestly, we're doing pretty darn good in Falls Church City Public Schools with the way that we educate our kids. So we're just continuing to do the right thing by our kids. Yeah.
Is Amplify a program that FCCPS chose to go with? Or
yes.
Is it coming, or are there other programs out there?
What happened is the Virginia Literacy Partnership vetted a whole bunch of programs and basically said, you may choose from these 5. I'm making 5 up. I don't exactly know. Okay. I do know that all of the curriculum leaders last year met multiple times to go through many, many different programs, vet them, see how they would work for our kids, and amplifies the one that shook out on top.
And Mount Daniel staff and Oak Street staff were a part of that committee.
Yeah, I was a part of that committee, our literacy specialist, right? Like there were multiple people who put eyes on this program and were thinking about, okay, how can this work for our kids? What parts of it, the bottom line is no program is ever gonna be perfect, right? Like that's just life. No program is gonna work, especially, a lot of these programs are based on Common Core standards. They're not necessarily based on Virginia standards. So while they cover most of the Virginia standards, not all, but like that's where we as the teachers, my teachers who are the experts come in and say, hey, let's add this, let's change this, let's modify this, and are making it work for their kids. And also when you get a curriculum, it's one size fits all. And as we know, education is not. Right? And so again, that's where we lean on the teachers to differentiate based on the kids that they know they have in their classroom. That's why we look at data. That's why we collect qualitative data or quantitative data. Like when we're going into classes, when we're doing observations, we're like, I wonder if that could work better. And so those are ongoing conversations. This is year one of a new program, and I know that we're just gonna keep getting better and better every single year.
Right.
So yeah.
I have another question.
Sure.
There were a lot of acronyms in there.
Yes.
So can you go back, I know you talked through it already, but the PYP, and then that's through fifth grade, and then?
Yes. So IB, International Baccalaureate, is the organization. With International Baccalaureate, there are 4 programs. We in FCCPS offer all 4, which is unique, I will let you know. We are one of, I think, 8 continuum districts in Virginia, maybe 9, I think one more got added, but so PYP is the primary years program. Once they're at Henderson, they go into the middle years program, which covers grades 6 through 10. And then at the 11th and 12th grade level, this is where student choice really comes in. So they can choose to go for the full IB diploma through the diploma program. I promise more things will get explained to you as your kids get older, I promise. Or our newest IB program is called the career-related program. And I helped onboard the career-related program, and so I get really excited about it. For kids who are, so I always use myself as an example. I would have been a great CP kid because my junior year in high school, I knew I wanted to study music. And so my senior year of high school, 4 out of my 7 classes were music classes. I could have gotten a certificate from IB that said, you have delved into music, you've explored ethical dilemmas in your field. I got college credit for some of the classes that I was taking, right? So I wish that had been around when I was a kid. Now I did still get some college credit for my AP Music Theory, thank goodness. But it's really about like kids who already know what they want to do and who really want to dig in. So we have a lot, we offer sports medicine, design, computer science. These are all pathways that you can take. Kids can also choose in their junior and senior year not to get a diploma, not to get the career-related certificate, but they can still take those diploma-level classes if they want. I don't know if any of your schools offered AP, advanced placement courses. We offer a few of those, but more than that, we're offering diploma program courses as the higher level courses. So it's very much choose your own adventure by the time you get to your junior and senior year of high school. But the beautiful thing is because they've been prepped from pre-K through 10 in the IB framework, they are more than ready to choose whatever path they want to do. And it was a very long explanation, but I was trying to give you the big, broad. I have the pleasure now of having worked with every single IB program that we offer, so I have a freakish amount of knowledge on IB, which, people are always like, if you gave a TED Talk on what could you give it on? I'm like, IB, all the IB programs, so yeah.
How do the new standards from Virginia this year fit into what we've already built as an IB program here in Falls Church? Does it tend to affect it large scale, small scale?
It definitely affects it large scale, I will tell you that. And I will tell you that we're not fully there in terms of integrating all of these new things into the IB framework because it is year 1 of implementing new standards. Yeah.
That's an every 7-year thing, right? The Virginia standards, they get reassessed every 7 years.
Hypothetically, yes. Has it been consistently that? No. But I would say in certain aspects, like science and social studies, we already were prepped to implement those new standards. We already had learning experiences that were inquiry-based that aligned. So like those two subject areas did not really change. What we're trying to navigate now is how our literacy standards and program and our math standards really fully integrate into our unit planners that we already have. And then making the changes that we need to make. So I'm not gonna I wouldn't get up here and say like, yeah, it's smooth sailing, but that's okay too, because just as much as we want our kids to have a growth mindset, so do we want our teachers. The only thing constant in education is change. Really, I mean, that's truly it. You have to be constantly flexible as an educator to respond to all these things because they can change on a dime. Depending on lots of outside factors. But at the end of the day, our teachers always put students first. And that's what they have at the center of education, no matter what standards we have, no matter what curriculum program. So, yeah. Well, thanks all for coming today.
Yes, thank you.
Feel free, if
Thank
you
you
get
both.
home and think of any questions that you still had, feel free to email me, and I will do my best to answer you.
Okay, thank you.